Welcome to today's session, which is all about resume writing. I'm very excited to be here with you today because resume is one of those things that are very culture appropriate, meaning a way that a resume is written in Brazil or in China or in India or elsewhere is very different to what's acceptable or expected here in Australia. My name is Elena and I have been in Australia for 15 years. When I first came out, I had no idea that my resume was not being accepted and I was not getting a job interview because it was not in the right format. It was not presenting the right information. So I've been sharing what I've learned over these several years here in Adelaide, South Australia, with all the international students I know and also migrants to help them gain employment. I know that getting a job, it can be really life-changing, not just in regards to visa and how visa can transition to other ones, but also in regards to how that makes you feel once you are contributing, you're earning money, and you can really settle here in Australia. I know it can make a big difference. These are my contacts. If you want to get in touch, would love to hear from you. This is my LinkedIn, as you can see here, and my WeChat details as well. Feel free to reach out and would love to hear from you. Now, this is an overview for today. So we are looking first at the importance of a resume. Why should we care? What do we need to know about it? Secondly, I will take you through a step-by-step resume writing. So taking each of the components that you need to have in your resume, but also taking into account some of those questions that you may have about your experience, or if you don't have experience, and what do you do in regards to that. Then I'm going to cover 7 things that you should never do in your resume, and then 7 things that you must always do. So I hope you really enjoy this session and you can take a lot from it. So why is a resume so important? Look, the resume is that first point of contact, along with your cover letter, of course, that you are going to have with an employer. So they cannot see you, they cannot hear you, they cannot see, what you can do. However, that piece of paper, your resume, is representing your ability, your skills, and you as a professional. If that document is not looking as good as it could look, or if the information in there is not as relevant as it could be, then unfortunately, you're probably going to miss out on an opportunity to be interviewed for a job. So it's really important that that first impression that the employer is going to have about you is a really positive, really professional, and a very strong one. And this is what today's session is all about. I think it's really important to also consider which type of resume is right for you. So there are 3 main types of resumes that can suit different people, and it all depends on your previous experience, what you've studied in your country of origin, and what you're studying now, etc. Now I'll explain that to you. So the 3 different types are reverse chronological. This is the resume that most people use, and in fact, it's sort of what most of the content we're covering today relates to the reverse chronological type, because it is the most common, and particularly for graduates or migrants who have just arrived or been here in Australia for a short time, that resume makes more sense. Now, the other type is the functional. So a functional resume will highlight mostly the different skills that you have across different industries or job types. Okay? And the last one is a career summary. So a career summary will be quite a short resume, normally 1 page, including all the information. Obviously, in 1 page, you wouldn't be able to include much detail, particularly about different jobs that you may have had. So it's really a summary of the different jobs, companies you've worked for, and then some information about your skills, etc. The career summary one, I would not recommend that for you. It's a very specific one that Some companies may ask for, but the majority of the places that, and Australia as a country of course, would be expecting for you to send one of these two types, either reverse chronological, which we'll cover today, or the functional style. If you're curious about the different styles and different types and how your information can be presented, please, have a look online at the different types. But these are the names of what they're called, so you can easily see that. Now, I get a few questions about templates and if people should be using a template or not, etc. So I think it's really useful for us to have that conversation now. Templates, they are normally good in the sense that they will have, everything is aligned, it's the right margin on the sides, so normally they look really good. The problem with templates though is that you may have experience or information that's a little bit different to those categories that the template provides, and you may not be able to include those. Now, remember that the resume, that's your professional life. That's a representation of you as a professional. So as such, it's really important that your experience is all translating into the document and not that you're trying to fit it in a template. So I think templates are good in the sense of how they look. However, you need to make sure that you select the right template for you, that you'll be able to include all the information that's relevant and that's really going to have people calling you to interview you. Now we start this new part of today's session, which is all about how do you actually write a resume. And it will give you a step-by-step explanation of how you can do that. The first part of your resume that you need to consider is obviously the first part that the contacts or the hiring manager is going to look at, which is your contact details. So, your name. I would recommend you do name and surname. So 2 names. I myself have 4 names, so I keep it to 2. So my first name, Elena, and one of my last names, which is Muller. Now, this would not be fraud or frowned upon, because you need to, you would still provide your documentation, you'd still provide your full name once you received a job offer, okay? But obviously, if my name is Elena Muller and I put on my resume as, Mary Smith, that's a problem, because that's not my name or my surname. So I would say maybe stick to 1 surname and 1 first name, your most common one, rather than having your full name if it's very long. The other consideration with your name and surname as well is when you look at your email address, it's very important that your email address and your name are the same. Okay, so for example, my full name is Elena Miller Pinto Junqueira. I go by Elena Muller on my LinkedIn, on my email address, on my resume, all my my cover letters, all my documentation. Now, if my email address would be Elena Junqueira, for example, which is my other surname, that would look a bit awkward because it looks like it's a different person, even though it's still me. So you really need to be aware and maybe open an email address with your name as it's showing on your resume. And then your cover letter, of course, you use the same name. And then, the answer on your phone when someone calls, it's the same name. Because you want to keep that consistency and professionalism about you. So with email addresses, I have seen a lot of people who have only numbers as an email address. I would recommend that that's not a good idea for job search. It's better that you open a new email address, as I mentioned, with your name and surname. I've seen emails, people applying for jobs. I've been involved in many job interviews and selecting candidates to be interviewed and then deciding who gets a job. I've been doing that for the last 12 years now. And what I've seen is people have really strange email addresses which are not professional at all. For example, I don't like beetroot@gmail.com. That's not appropriate. Or Candy Crush 237@gmail. That's your personal life. If people like playing games and doing different things, great. Use that as your email for your family to write you or your friends, etc. But not for your resume. With your mobile number, you'll notice here that there are 4 numbers, a space, 3 numbers, and then a space. It's very common that people will put all the 10 numbers of their mobile phone all together. It's very confusing and hard to read. This is better in having this spacing, okay? So 4 space 3 space 3. So do that. The other thing here that you'll notice is that the full address is not included. It's just the suburb, the state, and the postcode. You don't need to put, which unit number you are, or which house number, or which street. You don't need that. Just the suburb is enough. And it looks cleaner and better as well. Good. Now we are looking at your qualifications. Your qualifications is, some people call it education. It varies, but I think qualifications encompasses everything. With your qualifications, you really want to be providing the course, the name of the institution. If the university of the institution was not here in Australia, or if it was interstate, I want you to also add the state and the country where it's from. So let's say if you studied in Victoria, in Melbourne, you would put, at Monash University, Victoria, VIC, so 3 letters is enough, because that's how the state is known, Australia, so that people know. Similarly, if you have qualifications from overseas, include, the name of the qualification, the name of the institution, and then comma, the country. You don't need to put state in that case. The other thing that I wanted to include is also the month and the year that you started, that would be here, and then the month and the year that you finished. If you have not yet finished your qualification, that's fine. You will put the month and year that you started, and then you add here current or in progress or expected finish December 2021. There's some options there. You see what fits better and what you prefer. The other thing, and why I've included this arrow here, is that when you're writing your qualifications, you want to have the qualification that you're doing now to be here, to be the first thing that the employer reads. And what you've done before to be later. And what you've done before then to be then. Okay? So it's very common that people will start, say, with their, their degree and then their master's. No, it's the other way around. So you go with your bachelor first and then your master's afterwards. Or if you've done a different bachelor in your country, that's fine. Put your bachelor here, what you've done in your own original country, and then you put what you're studying now here. Be that a degree or a diploma, it doesn't matter. You just need to ensure that whatever's happening now or more recently goes first. So let's talk about your work experience. And even if you have no work experience before, that's fine, because I'm going to cover what to do in that case. Now, with your work experience, and that could be internship or volunteering, etc., you always want to have this same structure. So you have the role or the title exactly as it appears on your contract of employment. So you're not like inventing titles, that's exactly how it shows in the original and official documentation. Then you have the company name. With company name, if it's outside of South Australia, you want to include the state. And if it's outside of Australia, you want to include the country where you had that experience. Then you obviously have the month and year that you started, and then again the month and year that you finished, or if it's still a job that you have, you put as being current. The other thing is about the overview of the role. So you really just want 1 or 2 lines explaining some context around the role that you've held or that you're currently in. So something like, a large manufacturer in South Australia with over 600 staff. I was responsible for preparing the company for an upcoming audit. So in a couple of lines, just explaining what the company is about and what you were doing there. So with key responsibilities, you really want to start that with a verb. For example, organize annual general meeting for 50 attendees. Prepare office of 10 people to move premises. So they're always starting with action verbs, or really verbs which clearly explain the things you are responsible to do and achieve. It's enough to insert 2 to 3 responsibilities, but depending on how long you were there for or how big the project was, it's okay to include up to 5 or 6. Then we have achievements. Achievements, I cannot highlight how important those are for the perception that a recruitment team or that a hiring manager is going to have about you and your abilities. So with your achievements, you really want to think back when you were in that role, or if you're currently there. Has there been anything that you suggested or that you've actually done that saved time for that company or staff time, some efficiencies, a report that you wrote, some code that you've done that saved time for someone, or for yourself, or for your manager? The other one is saved money. So maybe there was a review of supplier, maybe there was a cheaper product, or maybe there was a better product that you found or that you recommended. Maybe you have, reorganized a filing cabinet. It doesn't have to be something huge, could be something small. Maybe you reorganized something and the company saved time or money, or any other efficiencies. You are the only person that knows what you've done to make the place where you worked a better place. And that's the time, under achievements, to include those actions that you've done. Now, I can almost hear you asking me, what if I don't have experience? Yeah? Because up until now, it's been very focused on, for those that have experience, this is how you present it. But if you don't have experience, that's okay. I really want you to focus on what you do have. Okay? So, thinking about the same framework, but have you done an internship before? If you have, it's the same framework. So, which role you had, which company, how long were you there for, time, when you started, when you ended. Then you look at key responsibilities, what did you actually do there, and then any achievements that you may have. The other one is university projects, or any projects that you're doing outside university, but you're doing either to help a company or extracurricular activities, or a project that maybe you're doing by yourself or with a group of friends that you are working on something. I wanted to include that as well, using the same sort of career history framework as I've shown you before. Because there's value in that, and there's also, it's showing your initiative, it's showing what you're learning through that experience. It can actually add quite a lot of excitement, if you like, for someone who's reading your resume. And the other one is volunteering. I know that lots of people volunteer. I'm a volunteer myself, and I know that volunteering actually can teach all of us quite a lot of different skills, particularly skills dealing with different people. But it all depends on what that volunteering activity is. If you are doing volunteering, or if you have done volunteering, then you use this same framework to represent and explain what you have done, what were your responsibilities, and what are your achievements. Now, another question that people ask quite a lot is, what if I only have overseas experience? And unfortunately, I've seen people who have quite good experience overseas, but they don't include that in their resume because they don't think that's relevant. Look, the truth is, I've included this picture here for you. When a recruiter or a hiring manager is looking for which candidate to choose to come to a job interview, and no one has got any experience, but someone has got overseas experience, the one with experience, regardless if it's here or where, is at an advantage. Okay, so it's good to have experience, and you need to include that. So if you have done an internship that was overseas, you need to include that. If you have had a job overseas, you need to include that. Even if the job is not related, even if the internship is not related, that's just showing to the employer that you are willing to work hard, that you know how an office works, you know how to be on time, you know how to relate to others. That's showing a range of other things as compared to someone that has not been in any workplace ever, or has not had any professional experience of any sort before. What if your current job is not related to your degree? Okay, that is the case of many people, because you know, when we come to Australia and we're trying to sort out visa and everything, we will work in whatever work is available. Even if it's not related to our degree, it doesn't matter, because we need to eat and we need to raise some money for ourselves. So I totally understand that. To give you guys some context, my first job, I'm a teacher by trade, and then I've become a businesswoman in the last 5 to 7 years. When we start, we do whatever it takes. In my case, I started in a bakery. I was sweeping the floors, I was selling a bit of bread. I would do that on weekends when they needed me. I would just go. It would take me 2 hours to take the bus first, then take the train, and then walk up to the place where the bakery was. We do whatever it takes. So I totally understand that maybe for many of you, that your current job is not going to be related to your degree or the area that you see yourself professionally. So what do you do in that case? Well, I say we add an extra category to your resume. So we have 2 categories here, as you can see. We have employment history. In employment history, you would add anything that's not related to your degree. So let's say if you are an Uber driver, you add it to employment history. I worked in a bakery, the bakery comes here. You are doing some tutoring, let's say, it's employment history. And then anything that is related to your profession, to your degree, to where you're going in your career, it gets added here. So ideally, in your resume, you would have your contact details first, a personal statement then, which explains, what you're about and what you need to what you want that employer to know about you. And just so you know, I'm doing a whole new session about personal statement and how to write those. But it's important that you do write one. And then after that, so you have personal information or contact details, personal statement, and then you have your professional experience. Then you may have your education, or if you have no professional experience, you would have your employment history at that point, and then your education, or your education first, employment history. It all depends, the order of things depends on your experience, your skills, and what you can do, and how you want to be perceived by that employer. So if you have different experiences that would fit in both, then you include both in your resume. Just be mindful to include the correct experience under the correct category. Another thing that needs to be included in your resume are your skills. So I really foresee you having one resume that includes everything that you have ever done, all your skills, everything. And then, as you apply for different jobs, you change that resume slightly to suit the different jobs that you're applying for. For example, you may have 15 skills and different things that you can do, and they could be applied across different industries, etc. If you're applying for a specific position and they asked for 5 of those skills that you have, then you would include those 5. You don't need to include 20. Yeah. So I think that's what many people don't do. So either people will include all of their skills for every position, or they will have, 2 or 3 that, again, they don't get altered according to the company. Now, the other thing too I need to tell you is this. When there is a list like that, the human eye will read with great detail the first 2 dot points. It will sort of skim through the other ones and it will read the last one. So when you're applying for a job, as you tailor your resume, as you change your resume specifically for that position, and you wouldn't change a lot, but you would change some of the skills potentially, as to take away some that don't apply and include some that do apply, in the case that you have lots of skills. In that case, what you would do is, whatever the company considers to be more important of those skills, you would put them on top and on the last one. And the ones that they're like, oh, that's desirable, you don't need to have that, or it's great if you know this software, whatever, you include in the middle. So whatever is most important that you really want them to know, first and second, and then the last. Keep that in mind. I know this information is based by research, and it's something to do with how we humans read lists. So I think it's useful for you to know that as well as you prepare your resume. The next item is about your referees. So you really don't need to include your referees, their name, title, telephone number and email address. You don't need to include that on your resume. You will only provide those names and details once the company who has interviewed you asks you for it. Now, some companies, they ask in their job ad, they say, please provide names and details of 2 or 3 referees. If they are asking for that in the job ad, then you need to provide. Most people will not ask. If they are not asking, that's how you write in your resume. References available upon request. And what this means is that you do have referees and you will provide them once you are asked to provide that. Now, you may have other skills and things that you have done in the past that I have not yet covered. So it's okay to add extra categories to really show what you have done in the past and what you can do. It's okay to add according to what you have. So you could add a category to talk about your interests, and it would be really similar to the skills, just dot points. You could add about volunteering, and then you would explain when did it start, when did it end, would be very similar to the career history framework. Some people have done publications in the past, great, include that. Some people have written books, great, include that. Any projects you have done, either inside the university or on your own time, fine, include those, absolutely. The other thing are certifications. So many people have different certifications, be that, first aid or senior first aid, etc. White card, this would be a license. So people have different certifications, include them in there. If you have a license like white card, driver's license, etc., I would include those in there as well. Add the extra category and include those. Okay. Remember, the resume is to suit you and your experience. It's not to fit a template. And the other one is awards. So if you've got any commendation, any awards that you have received, either at work or at university or any other place, I would really like to see a category drawing the eye of the person who's reading your resume about the awards and what you've done in the past. Now, there are some things that you should never do in your resume, and I really want to cover those because, as I mentioned, a resume is something that is cultural, meaning it changes from culture to culture. So some of these things that I'm going to mention are okay to do in Brazil, where I come from, and I'm sure some of those things will be okay to do in your own country of origin. However, I need to highlight to you that they're not okay to do here. And if you're doing that, maybe it could be a reason why you're not getting an interview, because your resume is looking not as professional as it could. So don't do these 7 things, okay? The first one is, please do not include if you're married or not, how old you are, which race or ethnicity you are, which country you're from or where you were born, and if your health is really good or really bad. That's irrelevant. In Australia, it's very important to be fair about which candidates get selected for an interview and which candidate gets a job offer. And all of this and more are basis for discrimination. So unfortunately, around the world, people are discriminated against their age, if they're too old, if they're too young, if they're married, if they're not, which race they're from, which religion they're from. And here in Australia, there's a very strong legislation around not discriminating people, being fair and giving people a chance to really, if they have the right skills, to get a job and to get a job offer. So it's very important that you don't include any of those details in your resume, because it should be about who you are as a person, not about your religion, your age, your marital status, etc. The other thing that you should not do, don't include a photo. Even some templates, I'm sure you'll see online, some online templates, they have the option to include a photo. Don't include a photo at all, because it's not expected, and it's a bit weird when you're going through a pile of, say, 200 resumes and one of them has got a photo. It can actually work against you in the sense that it looks a bit unprofessional. The other thing that you don't need to include is a salary range. So you don't need to say what your salary expectation is for that job. This is something that either is going to be in the job ad, already explained, or the company, when they do a phone interview with you, they will ask or share the information with you. You don't need to include that on your resume. Next, please don't write any negative comments. I have recently seen this resume where the person had explanations about why they had left different jobs and moved on to other ones. And there were things like, reason for leaving, the job was very busy and I couldn't meet my targets. Or, the company changed ownership and I didn't agree with it. Don't write negative comments. It can actually backfire and work against you. Okay? You don't need to include a reason for why you left a job either. Okay? You don't need to include that at all in your resume. Number 5, do not include your signature. I've seen some resumes, quite a few of them actually, where people put, I declare the contents of these documents to be true and correct, and then they sign. You don't need to do that. People expect that as you present your resume and cover letter, that those are correct and that those are true. So you don't need to add a declaration to say that. Number 6, no mistakes. Okay, if that document is representing you and how professional you are, you need to ensure that spelling and grammar are fine. There's no issue with utilize and utilize, the S and Z, which is very common that people may make that mistake or be using the US grammar and spelling version on their Word or whichever word processor they are using. So it's very important that set it to Australia, like English Australia, so that it will pick up the SZ correctly for you. The other thing too is name of different software. If it's MIOB and it's all capitals, or if it's all lowercase, or if it's a mix of lowercase and capitals, you want to get, I know these are little things, but as I mentioned, when you have 200 candidates and then you see something that you're like, that's not spelled right, this could make a difference between being invited for an interview or not. And number 7, as I mentioned, don't include your referee details in there. It's not a requirement. Just put that, they're available upon request. Meaning you ask me, I'll provide the names and numbers, but don't include them unless the job ad has specifically asked for those. Now, these are 7 things that you must make sure you do, all right? There are 7 things you must do with your resume. The first one is it needs to look good. Like, it doesn't have to have color, or it doesn't need to be a template, whatever. It's whatever works best for you, your skills and your expertise to be represented in a piece of paper. So if you were that piece of paper, I'm sure you would like that to be presented in the best way it can. It's not uncommon for a resume to actually take hours and hours to be done properly. It's not something that you can, sit down one afternoon and 3 hours later your resume is done. It takes days, it takes a long time to ensure it's correct and it looks good. So I really want you to invest that time to do that, because it could make the difference between not getting any job interviews and starting to get invited for interviews. And then from being interviewed, you will hopefully soon get an offer as well. So very important to have that right. So it needs to look good. Okay, it's that thing about first impression. People will look and they'll make a judgment about you within probably 2 seconds. They haven't even read half of but they read it going, oh, that looks good, I'll keep reading. Oh, that looks terrible. I'll read a little bit, and if it's not good, I'll put it in the no pile or the yes pile that recruiters have. As you're going through a big pile of resumes as a recruiter, you go, and it takes about 7 seconds each. So you'd go 7 seconds, you go through, yes or no, and you do that through that whole pile. And then you go back to the yes pile, and you would have maybe 20 or 30 resumes in there. And then from those 30 and 20, around that number, you would select about 8 for a telephone interview, and then about 3 for a face-to-face or online interview. Write a statement that really shows your personality. So most statements, the statement is that paragraph that goes underneath your contact details. In there, you would have an explanation either about your career, or what you want for your career, or what you're all about. And that would be between 3 and 4 lines. Now, I really want you to include your strengths and positive traits as they relate to the job ad. So this is not in isolation. There is a linkage between the job you're applying for and who you are as a person. That's what you write about. So really important that personal statement needs to be changed every time you apply for a new job. The good thing is that the personal statement is only about 4 sentences long. So it shouldn't take you too long to change that. You need to include all your qualifications in your resume. Okay, so make sure from when you left school, then it starts. All your qualifications, regardless if they are from here, from overseas, from wherever, you include them all. Number 4, you include all of your work experience. What if it's from overseas? You still include it. What if it's not related? You still include it. Okay, your resume needs to really paint the picture of all of you, all the jobs you've had, all the education you've studied, everything that you have done professionally. Number 5, you want to be using action verbs. So use action verbs such as develop, upgrade, review, implement, produce, plan, execute. You don't want to be writing things like responsible for blah blah blah. Don't write like this. Say, develop a business plan for new business unit, or for new project, or for new product, something like that. The other example that I have in there is make it measurable. So there is a difference saying, coding invoices or coded invoices. I don't know how many, I don't know which system, I don't know anything. So you want to be as specific as you can. For example, here you have, coded 20 invoices an hour in MIOB or MIOB. It's very clear for an accountant reading that to be able to see the speed of this person. Number 6, remember your achievements. Okay, it can relate, maybe it's about your GPA, maybe it's, your Golden Key Society, maybe it's a Chancellor's Award, maybe you got a Staff of the Month at your part-time job. It doesn't matter. Whatever you've done that, as I mentioned, saved time, saved money, changed things for the better where you are, be that in your studies or in your work, I really want you to include those in your resume. It makes a big difference and it really brings your personality to the document as well. And remember, once you include an achievement, remember to include the month and year in brackets after that achievement. Number 7, and the last one, be consistent. Okay, so when I talk about consistency is, are all the dates aligned? Are all the dot points the same? You can't start with one type of dot point and then I turn the page of your resume and there's another type at the back. No, it needs to be the same type across. It needs to be the same spacing. It needs to be everything aligned. So please make sure there's consistency in your formatting of the document, but also that not just you proofread, but you get some people that to proofread as well to ensure there's no typos and there's no mistakes. And that document is looking as good as it can look to represent you and what you can do. Now we are getting to the end of today's session. I thank you so much for watching this and I wish you all the success for your career and life. Thank you very much.